Finding the Funk, Alan Leeds, take 4.
So this phrase, the one, comes up all the time, and Bootsy went into the whole thing. What the fuck is the one? And why was James Brown obsessed with it?
You know, I gotta tell you something about the one. Ever since James died, we got a book out called The One. Al Sharpton did a wonderful eulogy of James Brown at the funeral in Augusta where he talked a lot about the one. Bootsy and all of them talk about the one. And I don't doubt at all that Bootsy had that conversation with James, and James explained his philosophy of rhythm and the fact that if you just came down on the one, heavy on the one, that it was going to give you an emphasis on stage that would be consistent and effective with a crowd. I mean, it was a device. It was as much a performing device as it was a musical device. It was like, listen, everything about James Brown, if you ever study the bio of James Brown, is all about look at me. Everything he did was to get attention, from the hair to the screaming to whatever. It was always in the extreme because this was a guy who growing up had no attention, was overlooked by everybody. School, the legal system threw him in a kid's prison and forgot about him and threw away the keys. His mother left him with his dad. His dad wouldn't take care of him and dumped him off on somebody. This is a kid who grew up overlooked. So everything about James Brown, his whole theory on how to make it as an adult in the real world was I must draw attention to myself. Whether it was boxing, which he tried before singing, everything was like, I must get attention. I need attention. I need attention. Attention was the only security blanket somebody like James Brown, growing up as he did, knew. It's the only security blanket he understood. There were no legal answers. There were no lawyers, doctors, or managers who could afford him the security that attention did. Because he knew as long as he had somebody's attention, he was like a grade A hustler. If I got your attention, somehow I'm gonna get you. I'll get you to buy a ticket, I'll get you to buy a record. At the worst, I'll get you to say you like me. But I will get something from you if I can get your attention. Just give me the attention. I'm in there, it's a wrap. The one is the extension of that whole life philosophy. It was like, if I want the crowd's attention, I'm gonna get it from beat one. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at me. Look at me. It's all about look at me. If I get your attention, you will buy this record. You will buy the ticket to this show. So I really look at it that way, more than just the coincidence of it being a musical device that's equally effective on the dance floor. Because once again, it's like, how do you get somebody up out of their chair onto the dance floor the quickest? You hit them, 1, 2, 3, get up and dance, get up and dance. It's all on the one.
Do you think that idea, philosophy of music, is that still, does people still use it, or is that just a thing for the time and now we've moved on? Is it?
Well, it became part of the musical vocabulary, just the approach. Because if you listen to, for example, Stax, which was, very active, their peak years were paralleled the years that Brown was inventing this funk that we're talking about, and their approach to beats was totally different. And for that matter, Motown was different still. So all of those things have become part of this melting pot of musical ideas that exist in the vocabulary of artists from the Prince generation on up to D'Angelo or Erica or Questlove and the Roots or whoever else is making contemporary music today that's an extension of that tree of life. So it's valid. But I just think it's one more arrow in your it's one more golf club in your case. It's just one more tool you use as a musician. Media being what it is, culture being what it is, it's a lot easier to get attention. You don't have young artists coming up with that obsession that James Brown had. He was a singular approach to life, because this was a guy who, his life story, where he came from, it was all too typical of his time and place. But thank goodness it ain't what's happening today. I mean, well, there are places where it is. Let's don't front, but that's another story. But when you look at a D'Angelo who grew up in Richmond, Virginia, he was never threatened with working in the cotton fields. I mean, I'm not saying life is automatically easy for every brother out there. I get that. But it ain't James Brown growing up in Georgia in the 1930s.
Thank God. I wouldn't get the cotton field wouldn't have worked for me.
No. Wouldn't work for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And those are the people that, should be on the same tombstone as Emmett Till, but they're nameless because they never even got that far. Right. And there was a whole lot of them who didn't work for, and they either ended up in jail or dead or drank themselves to death or whatever. And for whatever reason, James Brown had the inner strength to say, I ain't gonna be that. So I'm gonna figure out something, and I'm gonna die trying. And he did, but it was always, every step of that figuring it out was look at me, because I can't get you until I have your attention.
That's great. One more thing, that I can send that. I go back and you look at all those records from the 60s, most songwriters, black songwriters, wrote love songs, most part, but I was very rarely in their store. So his songs, it's very personal in a way that a lot of other songwriters were not.
Look at me. It's all part of that. I mean, I guess you could do a whole musicology study on the evolution of rhythm and blues, and going back to the country blues and gospel blues that goes back even into the 20s and 30s as to, so much of it was, and I'm not the sociologist to explain why, but so much of it was about, oh, baby, don't leave me. Or, please, please, please don't go. Or then James flipped it and said, try me. Back to me, So, but, when you listen to the soul era, they really were love songs, but often for the perspective of the guy who was trying to hold on to a woman who was going to leave him, or beg the attention of a woman who otherwise had overlooked him, or whatever. So, I don't know that was really unique to James Brown.
But,
I mean,
when you looked a little bit, he's the only person who used I all the time.
Okay, so you studied this to know, because I'd have to really,
I was struck by it, and I was like, he's so. I mean, not to say that
I mean, it makes sense.
But he's the only guy who used I all the time.
Makes sense.
I don't want nobody to give me nothing. I mean, it's all
right.
It's it leads to hip hop. You can see where he really is.
The precursor to that. Yeah.
He's the connection between the blues and that sense of my story. I'm not writing a generic thing that anyone could step into, which may have a metaphor. I'm personally telling you what I think,
right?
What I'm feeling.
Right. Well, I think part of that, maybe not all of it, but part of it is just the fact that there was a certain point where, for a combination of reasons, people began listening to him beyond just the lyrics of his songs. I mean, there was a point where he became a spokesman that was very unofficially representing a segment of the black community. I mean, there was a segment of young black America who very much related to his plight and his accomplishments and his determination to keep it real. And he spoke to those kids, or that segment of the community. He spoke and was listened to. And, I remember watching that transformation where he went from just being a really cool recording artist and entertainer to a person who was now addressing audiences from the stage on his shows, going on talk shows. I mean, you didn't hear Wilson Pickett on the Today Show discussing politics, or Otis Redding, or, well, God bless him, Sam Cooke didn't live long enough. But, occasionally, I mean, they would go on the talk shows and they do their songs and do their little humble thank yous and talk about their latest tour, and they were out. James Brown actually would go on the Today Show and not perform. I mean, sometimes he performed, but he would also, if there was ever any issue that related to the black community, or when major elections were coming up, and this is all from, late 60s, early 70s, Brown was a go-to spokesperson for the segment of the black community that he claimed to represent. And of course, this representation was very unofficial and even resented by others in the black community, which is a whole nother conversation. But the fact was, he was a go-to guy. So his words carried something. And there's a point where he had to have looked in the mirror and said, yeah, I'm that guy. So it's about I. It's I don't want nobody to give me nothing, because after all, you're waiting to hear what I have to say about this.
Dope. All right. Thank you. We can cut it.